You're listening to Working in Oncology, a podcast and video show that spotlights oncology practice staff and industry influencers who work behind the scenes to shape the future of oncology. The more knowledge the oncology community shares with each other, the more we all grow. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to Working in Oncology. I am your co-host for today, Alicia Evans, and I am joined by Dr. Joy Parchment. Dr. Joy, welcome to the show. I've been really looking forward to our conversation today. Career planning and professional development is something that many of us don't think about until we have to. We get caught up in the day-to-day work that is in front of us and fail to plan for the future. But as 2020 has taught us, nothing is certain. I know our listeners will find so much value in what you're going to share today. So before we jump into the conversation, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about you, your background, and what you do?
Thank you so much, Alicia. I am thrilled to be here, and I am honored to share some thoughts with your audience. So I am a nurse executive. I have to say I'm a former pediatric oncology nurse. Oncology is my love, and I stepped out of that setting to go into leadership. And so I am a nurse executive, and I have worked with numerous individuals and organizations to be able to build nurses and influence them and engage them in the profession. So I'm thrilled to share some thoughts with your audience.
That's incredible. So today we are going to discuss professional development and what it looks like for someone in a busy oncology practice. We're going to go over some steps that our viewers or listeners can take to help prepare them for the future. Okay. So as I said, sometimes we get caught up in day-to-day life. Working in an oncology office is sometimes hectic, and we put off planning for the future. But you said something really interesting the other day. It was each of us is gifted with unique abilities, and we have the obligation to grow and develop those abilities. And I love that quote. I said, I think that it should be stitched on a pillow somewhere. So for someone just starting to put a plan together, where do you think they should start?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think I'm going to look at it from two perspectives. And the first perspective is, I think it's important for any individual who is wanting to grow, they need to understand themselves just a little bit. And when I say two perspectives, there's an internal perspective and then there's an external perspective. Internally, you have to understand who you are, what your goals are, what your values are, what your strengths are, and where you actually will sit in comparison to everybody else. So remember the quote that you just used, you talked about the fact that it is important for us we have this obligation to learn and to grow. And if we don't do that, then we are being negligent with the gifts that we have. We're being negligent with understanding why we exist and what we're supposed to do in this vast realm of Earth, right? And so when we think about where do you start, you have to start with yourself. What are your goals? Why are you here? What is it that you want to accomplish? And where is it that you want to go?
Great. And so when we're looking into ourselves to kind of figure out where we stand and where we can make the most impact. So when we are doing this introspection, what are some resources, some places that maybe our listeners can look to kind of get inspiration and to see what the possibilities are?
So one of the things that I would suggest that they do would be to sit down and take out a piece of paper. Everybody always says you got to find a book or you got to do this or you got to do that. My piece would be, doesn't cost anything. I think everybody has a piece of paper. Everybody has a pen. People even have their phone. Let me just say that. People have their phone. Take your phone out, put up a note and say, what's right with Joy? What's right with Alicia? What are the strengths that I bring to the table? Am I somebody that's gifted to be able to communicate with somebody? Am I gifted to be able to build a relationship with somebody? Am I somebody who loves to write? So my daughter, when she was growing up, she loved to write, and she would read and write and read and write. And that was something that we had to feed. We fed her books, we fed her things so that she could write and think about what she was doing. So to me, it's the same thing, right? You take a sheet of paper, figure out what is it that you love to do, what are the strengths that you bring to the table, and then after you've identified that, then you start saying, okay, these are my strengths, and then how do I now put them into some type of a career path? So if it's something that I love to interact with individuals, maybe I need to be in the hospitality industry, right? Or if it's something that I love to read and write, then maybe I'm a journalist. Maybe I am working in marketing, creating different brochures or different things, or interacting with all of these groups. And so you really have to figure out where your strengths are. And so I would say, to answer your question, I would say, take out a piece of paper, start looking at who you are, what are your strengths, what is it that you bring to the table, what area of industry do you love? Because I'm sure there are other industries, and I'm not trying to get away from the healthcare industry. Some people love the healthcare industry. Some people will not ever work in the healthcare industry. I have a family member who will never work in healthcare because they're afraid of blood. So
that would be
right? And so they would never be somebody that you'd want to be in the healthcare industry. Now, they may be able to work on the outside, not doing patient care. So there's that.
So there are several fields, several paths that could be open to you once you've done an assessment, pen and paper, just write down what you like, what you don't like, and what you love to do.
Right. And I would add one more thing, and that is, what are your core values? What are things that are important to you? So if you're somebody who loves to be honest with people, that means you're probably very high on the integrity scale. If you're somebody who is super responsible and dependable, then that also then is a core value. That means that you are that dependable person you can be counted on. And so you might want to look at an industry where people can definitely count on you and give you tasks that would help you to be more responsible, to be consistent, to be, that person that everybody relies on. And so look at what are those core values that are important for you to do.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about kind of internal kind of assessment. What about external? What are some external factors that we should be considering when we're making a plan?
I think another important factor, external wise, would then be to say, okay, what industry am I looking at that I think that I want to go and grow in? I'm going to go back to my own example. When I was growing up, I knew I wanted to be a nurse. That was something that I knew, and nobody could take that away from me. And my parents sort of gave me that opportunity to go into that direction. I knew I didn't want to go into other fields. It just didn't feel right for me. I wanted to make an impact with patients, make an impact with nurses. And so when I was looking at where I needed to go to school, one of the things that I learned very early from my mother was, you need to go to a college and you need to go to a school that's accredited. And I didn't even know what the heck accredited meant. So I had to go look that up. So one of the things that I'm going to suggest is that if you're going to go to school or program, it could be associate degree program in a college, it could be a technical school, it could be wherever. I think the first thing you need to look at would be definitely, is that program, is that school accredited? And the reason why that is important, we know that in our healthcare industry, we have standards that we have to follow. In the education realm, it's no different. Everybody has standards to follow. And if a program is not meeting those standards, then they won't get that milestone or that accrediting mark to say that they're good enough. And the other thing is, if you go to a school that's not accredited, some organizations require that you graduate from an accredited school, that you graduate from an approved school. So if you don't do that, that could be limiting your opportunity as you move forward to go into the employment world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for those of us who see additional education in our future, we really need to examine the accreditation and approval of that school and make sure that maybe our goal employers are even accept degrees or diplomas from that program.
Exactly, Alicia, exactly.
So on the subject of school, the thing that kind of barrier, intimidation factor that really gets to people are the entrance tests. People know that there's an entrance test and they get intimidated, they don't want to try. What are some tips? Do you have any tips for preparing for or getting over that hurdle?
And that's a fabulous question. And there are lots of different books. It really would depend on which program that person is going to be going into. So if it's the GRE, the Graduate Record Examination, I would suggest that they take a review course. Take that review course, plan out your study time. What I find from individuals is that they underestimate the time that it will take them to review that information. And so if the time is, many times you have the opportunity to decide when you're going to take the exam. Some people may say, oh, I can ace this exam. I've done this before. The content is vast. The content is extensive. The content is vastly different from what you did when you went to school. And so it's important to dedicate specific time. What days, be very organized. What days are you going to study? When are you going to study? How long are you going to study for? Are you going to do a review course that's on the computer? Purchase a computer program? Are you going to get a book and go through the questions that way? So people have the opportunity to decide which review course they're going to go to. My recommendation would be that you use the same type of format that you're going to find in that entrance exam. So for example, most of those exams now are computer-based, and some people still like that paper and pencil, but you will be taking an exam on the computer. If you're taking an exam on the computer, then it's important for you to get familiar with the buttons that you're going to be pushing. It is pretty much going to be a timed test. And so simulate as close to as you possibly can that testing experience, because that testing experience, once you walk in, you'll be much more comfortable with that. So there's that. The second tip that I would give is that to think about it from the perspective of, okay, you can always repeat it. Some people think that you have to meet this deadline, and yes, you do in a way have to meet a deadline. But think about this, if you take it a second time, that's fine, right? You take it a second time, you're still moving forward toward your goal. Think about what you would have learned. What did you learn from having to take it the second time? And that's where I think there's a different mindset that people need to come into a test with. Okay, it's okay if I fail. If I take it a second time, okay, it's not going to be the end of the world. And then the third thing I would add is to de-stress. De-stress before you get into that testing environment. Get a good night's sleep before the exam and come up, eat a breakfast. Some people don't like to eat breakfast because they just don't. And eat a breakfast so that your sugar is high, that you're able to think and that you're able to process. So those would be my 3 tips.
Yeah, so prepare your mind with studying and also prepare your body the day of by eating a healthy breakfast.
Correct.
And calming yourself.
Correct.
So we've taken the exam, we've gotten our diploma or degree, it's time to look for a job, right? So probably the first step we'll need to take is to write a resume, a beautiful resume. Do you have any tips about resumes, what you like to see, what you should not see, do's, don'ts, any information you can give us?
Absolutely. I think the biggest tip that I would give anybody is make sure there are no grammatical mistakes. Spelling errors, grammatical mistakes, a resume that does not look professional will get tossed. I've done it. I know for a fact because I've done it. I've looked at several resumes and I've seen that one is not formatted correctly. I've seen a couple of misspelled words or there are some things that are missing. I don't even bother to give that resume person a second glance. The only way that I would give that person a second glance is if they were recommended, they came highly recommended to me. If they did not, then I would not look at their resume. And so that I think is the first thing. Make sure that you have down the correct information and the information is formatted. The information on your resume is formatted correctly. If that is not formatted correctly, you're going to lose out. Think about on the other side, right? Think about the person that's hiring. Your resume, you want to stand out, but I may be getting 50 or 100 resumes for one position. And if I'm going through 50 to 100 resumes, if yours doesn't meet that muster, then you won't get to second base.
That makes sense. I mean, it does speak to someone's attention to detail. If you're someone who doesn't check on the little things and you want you want the hiring manager to trust you to care for patients, it kind of raises some red flags, right? Maybe you don't pay attention to all the details that you should.
Absolutely. And that exactly is how I consider it. So if somebody doesn't really take the time to spell something correctly, spell it right, if they look at and it doesn't really fit with what I am looking for, then I know for a fact that I'm not going to give them that second opportunity, which is that interview.
Makes sense. And speaking of interviews, this is another intimidating step when looking for a new job. People are not sure how to carry themselves. What should I wear? What should I say? That's probably one of the most Googled questions. How do I answer my interview questions? Can you give us some tips on what to do and how, some interview tips from your experience?
Interview tips are so vital for any interview. And I would say the first thing when I see somebody is they need to be dressed correctly. I've had people come in to an interview with jeans. Now, I'm not a fan of jeans. I'm a fan of jeans outside, but for a business setting, a business opportunity, I'm not a fan of jeans. It doesn't speak to the ability of that person to put themselves and make themselves look professional. It's all about how that individual looks. It's all about whether, again, going back to your point, attention to detail. If that individual really does not take it tells me that they may not take good care of themselves. So if they don't take good care of themselves, how can I expect them to take good care of my patients or my customers? And so it's important for them to come in with, ladies obviously, have some makeup on, have on a clean, pressed, here's the word, pressed outfit. Because I've seen people come in for interviews in wrinkled clothes, absolutely, wrinkled clothes. They did not present themselves when they walked in. I did not believe that they had the confidence in themselves to be able to share the message that the organization had. Because think about this, right? The best asset for any organization is their workforce. That's the most important asset. And so if that asset really doesn't meet the values or the look of that organization, then this is, why would I hire somebody? Take a look around at the big, huge companies. I'm going to go to the tourist industry. Everybody around Central Florida is familiar with Disney. Everybody has gone to Disney. When you look at Disney, take a look at, next time you go, take a look at their team members. They are all polished. They're all, not that some of them have to look the same, right? Their uniforms are clean. Their uniforms look crisp. Their uniforms say to me that they know what they're doing. And so I have confidence in that person when I see them in a Disney park. And so when you're looking to interview, I would say the first tip, make sure that you look the part, or even look the part that's higher than what you're actually going to be interviewing for.
God, that makes perfect sense. And just for my own information, so someone interviewing in a hospital setting versus a private practice, do you think their interview style, their interview attire should be different? Should they be wearing scrubs, or should they go with a business suit?
Typically in a hospital environment, what we have seen is that our interviewees will come in with business attire. Mm-hmm. We would not expect them to come in with scrubs on, unless the manager specifically said, I want you to come in scrubs today because I want to have you meet with the team, or I want you to do a shadow with one of the team members, or something like that. So in a practice, I don't see that as being any different. How is that any different? Because we are still going to be expected to show our best face, to show our best foot. We're going to put the best foot forward, and you have to be able to show your presence. Because if you don't show your presence, then you're not going to get to the second stage, which is that interview process.
Understandable. You want the person that you're interviewing to be able to project the same professionalism in the interview that they would, to a patient. That makes sense.
Correct.
And so we've talked about the interview, but we know and we've talked about the resume, but we all know it takes sometimes a little bit more than just your paper resume to get in front of the right people. So let's talk a little bit about networking. We're all busy, we're working, we have COVID that kind of interrupts the normal flow of meeting people. So how do you recommend someone working in an oncology practice to start networking and get those connections that they'll need to move on to their next role?
Well, I will give two examples. One example would be in an oncology practice, particularly in any oncology specialty, there are numerous professional organizations. Mm-hmm. So I know in nursing, there's an oncology nursing society, oncology nursing association that any nurse can join. In that situation, once you are a member, an association member, you have the ability to network with a lot. When I say a lot, I mean hundreds of like-minded individuals, people who love oncology, people who There's pediatric side. You can flip into that if you wanted to. There is the breast cancer oncology group that you can flip into if that's what you're very passionate about. And so I would say for nurses, and even I'm not that familiar with the pharmacy world, but I would think that in the pharmacy world, there's still that ability to join a professional organization. So there's that. Now
So maybe look for an MA association or, okay.
Something to that effect, correct. The other thing that you could do, which doesn't cost any money, would be to get your profile up on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, okay. If anybody is not familiar with LinkedIn, my recommendation would be get your profile up. You can get a free profile. You don't need, that doesn't cost you any money at all. What it will do is that you will have to put some time in to beef that up. And when I say LinkedIn, the reason I say that is a place where you can network, you can find other individuals. Let me give you an example of that. I have a profile on LinkedIn, and about 3 months ago, a nurse accessed me and wanted to know how she can get her resume into the hands of a group of people and to get a job, obviously. And so I messaged her back and I said, please send me your resume. I looked at it and determined that she did have the qualifications to work in one of our areas where we were looking for people. And I took that resume that she sent me and sent it on to the correct people. That was a way to connect with somebody. I did not know her. I was not connected to her on LinkedIn. She found my profile, don't know how, she never told me, and she asked for assistance, right? And I forwarded that on to the people that I knew who would be looking for that type of a role, that person to fit that. Now, I'm not saying that every single person is going to have that type of an access or that type of a connection, but I think that's another great way to be able to identify people that are in your field that you can learn from. So I was struggling one time, another example, I was struggling with a question, and I found an individual who I met at a conference, and I loved her presentation, but I ended up, about a couple months later, I ended up with a very similar question. I didn't get her contact information when we were at the conference, and I happened to see that she was on LinkedIn. Guess what I did? I messaged her, asked her a question. She sent me back that answer that I needed, which helped me solve the problem. So the connections that you're able to make on LinkedIn are vast, and you can pretty much, the world is an oyster. People use that term. The world is open to you to be able to access people, not only here in the United States, but internationally. And so now you're not just here locally, you're expanded it from the state, you've expanded it from the nation, you've expanded it now internationally. Can you imagine the reach? Yeah. Look at the reach that you could have if you were able to just have that profile on LinkedIn. So two things, definitely join a professional organization, find one, join one. And then the second thing would be to get a profile on LinkedIn and expand that profile, and then start connecting with individuals to be able to expand into your network.
Yes. So I see so often oncology office workers are not used to putting themselves out there. They're not used to promoting themselves. They're nose to the grindstone, working every day. But it sounds like a LinkedIn profile is a great way to promote yourself, to make connections, not just, in preparation for the next job, but in case they have a question. There's the whole world of LinkedIn available to them to get that question answered, and maybe improve patient care, maybe improve their everyday life.
You are absolutely correct, Alicia. I have found that to be personally, I've done it. I've given you two examples of how it can be used. And it is a rewarding thing to be able to post some of the achievements that you would have done. So LinkedIn is also another way to promote yourself, to be able to say, I got my degree, or I finished this certification, or I was able to do whatever. That's another way of recognizing and promoting the things that you have done. Because I believe that everybody, I'm going back to the original quote, everybody has some unique skills and abilities. I don't know if one day I'm going to need somebody in that oncology practice. I don't know if I would be able to need an idea that that person has done. I don't know if this individual has innovated, done some creative practice or initiative that I would need. And the only way I'm going to know that is if they post it on LinkedIn so that I can find that information out. And so when you think about self-promotion, we are sharing what we have done with the world. We're sharing the good things that we have done with the world. And so to me, I think we have that professional obligation to share. It's that reciprocal thing. You give and you're going to get. And so how do you help somebody? If people who are in healthcare, our underlying reason for doing that is that we want to help. Mm-hmm. And so one way that you're helping, not necessarily helping a patient, but one way that you're helping is that you're helping to expand the knowledge. You're helping to expand the standard. You're helping to get, to improve what you have said that you wanted to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we started the podcast, right? We want to be a place where you can collect different ideas from different oncology practices and maybe help move the practice forward.
Exactly. And I love that. I really love that.
This has been such a great conversation. And so I have a question that I like to kind of close us out with. And it's not really related to what we've talked about before, but what is a commonly held belief in your field that you just want to get rid of it? It's just so false. It's an urban myth and it's not true at all. And you wish people would stop doing it.
I have a lot of urban myths, so to speak, but I think my main one is, particularly in healthcare, we don't see that technology can benefit us. So when you
this kind of links back to the LinkedIn, right? That's a bit of technology that people are kind of hesitant to adopt.
Right. So when you think about smart homes, right? Everybody understands that. People have a Google in their home and it says, tell me, what about this? You pick up your phone and you say, hey, Siri, and it tells you X, Y, Z. So how do we use that technology in a way that will take better care of our patients? How do we use robotics that is totally integrated in healthcare? How do we use artificial intelligence to be totally integrated in healthcare? So the pandemic in a healthcare environment, the pandemic has pushed us to do virtual telehealth visits, has pushed us to do whatever you want to call it, virtual visits, telehealth visits, televisits, whatever the word is. And that means for us now, we're doing things that we never thought we would do. Even my primary physician is doing televisits. She is somebody who is so engaging. She loves her patient contact. In the post-COVID world, she will touch your hand, really caring individual. She can't do that right now with some COVID, precautions that we currently have. So she is now doing televisits. and she has to adapt. So in addition to the big myth is the healthcare environment, we can come into a better utilization of technology. And we need to transform care using technology, because we cannot be behind. If you look at some of the other industries, some of the hotel tourist industries, you walk in and you push a button and everything, you have everything at your disposal. So why can't we do the same thing in a hospital setting? Why can't a patient who is in a hospital room push a button and get whatever blanket that they want delivered to them? Why can't we do some of those other things? And so I think the myth is that healthcare is not able to transform, and I have to disagree with that myth. Healthcare must transform if we're going to continue to give our patients the exemplary care that they need.
That is a wonderful insight, Dr. Joy. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I can really see how technology kind of works into the networking, and using a new platform or a different platform like LinkedIn, especially considering the COVID precautions, we can share more information, push more technology out, and it really is a resource also for getting the latest in technology. So as soon as there's a new development, it's posted on LinkedIn, and you can be at the forefront and know this information before it's spread out to the masses. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Working in Oncology, and we really appreciate you being a guest.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I have enjoyed our conversation. I am totally impressed by your ability to be so creative and to push the conversation even more. Thank you. I've been honored to participate in this amazing podcast.
Thanks again, Dr. Joy.
You've been listening to Working in Oncology. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to leave a quick rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.